Conference championship weekend did not disappoint. The playoff committee did not disappoint. And the transfer portal is looking like it's also not going to disappoint. We've got breakdowns of the conference championship games from the past weekend. My opinion on the playoff selections that were made. A couple of coaches that I think really solidified their place in the coaching world this season. The transfer portal is just heating up right now. 691 players entered on Monday. That's only going to continue. We're starting to get crystal balls in for some players. We're learning about offers and visits coming out for other players. Clemson made some coaching hires, and then I've also got a couple of early bowl games to keep an eye on. Let's go ahead and jump into the Big 12 breakdown that was Texas versus Oklahoma State. Texas dominated. The offense was smooth. Quinn Ewers was efficient. Quinn Ewers was deadly. That offense is clicking right now on all cylinders. I think it really started against Iowa State, even though the scoreboard may not really show that, but they controlled that game offensively in Ames, Iowa 3 weeks ago now. And then, Texas Tech, they dropped 50, and Oklahoma State, there was nothing they could do to stop Texas this game. Ollie Gordon had a good game. Oklahoma State figured out some things offensively that got some drives going on Texas and put up a little bit of points on the scoreboard. But Texas is playing hot right now. This was a really good Big 12 championship. This was their first Big 12 championship win since, I believe, 2009, which is insane to think about, basically 15 years ago. But in their last year in the Big 12, they get it done again, going to the playoffs this year. They'll be facing Washington. That's going to be a great game, and they're heading to the SEC next year. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about that Washington-Oregon game. I picked Oregon to win and cover, which was a 9.5-point spread, and Washington got me. They beat Oregon. I picked Washington to win the regular season matchup. I thought Oregon was going to get them this time, and Washington just never let Oregon settle down or settle into the game. They kept pressure up. They matched Oregon physically, which I did not think they were going to be able to do. I did say in the prediction video that if they were going to win this game, Michael Penix and the receivers were going to have to just be dialed in all game long. And honestly, they were dialed in all game long, but they weren't dialed into the expectation. I thought they won this game because Dylan Johnson and the offensive line paved a way for Dylan Johnson, and they couldn't bring Dylan Johnson down. He was breaking tackles. He was falling forward. He was fighting through contact. They were able to play a really physical style of football in the run game, and then also supplement that with some explosive passing. Michael Penix can throw the ball. Those receivers can run routes, and they can catch the ball. And it's not just one, it's not just two, and it's really not just three. They have a whole cast of guys. It's not just Rome Odunze. It's not just Jalen McMillan. They got Jalen Polk. They've got weapons all over the field on offense, and that Washington-Texas game, it's going to be broken down as we get closer to the playoffs, but a lot of people right now think Texas is just kind of a lock to the championship, and that couldn't be further from the truth. This Washington offense is the best as it gets, and this defense showed up in a big way to me. They put Bo Nix under a lot of pressure. They were able to not necessarily just eliminate the run game, but they mitigated it a lot, and then they prevented a lot of the explosive passing that I thought we were going to be able to see. A lot of Oregon's offense is built off of kind of yards after catch, and Oregon receivers did kind of break away on a couple plays, break some tackles, make some guys miss, and get down the field. But for the most part, Washington played really sound on defense and stopping that from happening. And that was a really impressive win. And it might be the most impressive, even more so than the game I'm about to talk about next, which was the SEC championship. This is one of the best conference championship games I've ever watched. It might be the best one. It came down to the wire, just like I thought it would. I picked Bama to win. Bama did win. You had a chance to kill Bama early in the season. QB struggles. The offensive line was playing at just a horrific rate. They were giving up some explosive plays defensively. They couldn't generate a run game or a consistent run game, and you couldn't do it. Texas beat them, and you needed Texas A&M, you needed Tennessee, you needed one more team to step up, and you couldn't get that to happen. And now Bama is back in the playoffs after beating Georgia, who was on 2 straight national championships and a 29-game win streak. One thing to note, man, is just how physical Bama played. The past 3 seasons, you've never seen a team really even go toe-for-toe with Georgia in terms of physicality. And not only did Bama go toe-for-toe with them, but they were the more physical team on the field, which was really impressive to see, because the past 2 or 3 years, if you kind of watch, Alabama football, you kind of notice that physicality edge just kind of dipped a little bit after a little bit each season. And they had it back, Saturday night. That was a really, really impressive performance. Jalen Milroe, he's clicking. It took him a couple games to get going. He got benched against South Florida, but he's in full stride right now. They've got an offense that distributes the ball really well to their receiving corps. Jermaine Burton is probably their best one, and he stepped up in some big moments. That run game was held to under 3 yards per carry. And they still figured out a way to win the game. They're about to play a really good Michigan run defense, so that they've got to figure out how to get the run game going better. But the one thing that can be said about this Bama team is that in some critical moments, they found ways to get things done. You think about, 4th and 31 against Auburn. You think about really this entire game. I think they went 7 for 16 on 3rd downs. But in the critical moments, they found ways to make plays that needed to be made. Georgia is still one of the best 4 teams in the country. I'll get back to that when I talk about the playoffs. But Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, those dudes played a Warriors effort. They were both hurt. Brock Bowers is coming off surgery that happened 6 or 7 weeks ago on his ankle. Ladd McConkey was banged up, and they played through it. They continued to make plays. Carson Beck is still the real deal at quarterback. Georgia's going to be in good hands next year with him. I think the biggest thing was Georgia's defense, which I kind of talked about. Was this the same Georgia defense or same Georgia team that has struggled against elite receiving corps and elite QB play? And I said I don't think it was. And I think I was right in saying that. They've just lost so much talent at the top over the past 2 years. And, yeah, they're still one of the best defenses in the country and still one of the most talented defenses in the country. But they faced a different threat in Jalen Milroe, a different or more dynamic threat in terms of his ability to throw the ball down the field and also use his legs as well. And for a team that really struggled to generate pass rush early in the season and then started to pick it up later in the season, their pass rush kind of got shut down by Alabama. There were some moments where it got in the backfield, but for the most part, that Alabama offensive line really just controlled the game from start to finish. And that's a testament to the Alabama coaching staff, not just Nick Saban. Nick Saban deserves the credit for bringing in these guys, but you can say that about every single assistant coach on that Bama coaching staff, from Tommy Rees at OC for figuring out how to develop this offense and have an identity to build around with Milroe, to Kevin Steele, who took a defense that really last year looked like they were playing scared half the time, to a team that goes up and contests every single jump ball. They make tackles. They get in the backfield. They're aggressive. They try to force turnovers. They just play with a much different edge physically and with just a much more aggressive mindset as well. And then you look at like the O-line. The O-line in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season was one of the worst offensive lines in the country. And they basically just eliminated any sort of pass rush from Georgia in the SEC championship game. Say the same about the running backs coach, the D-line coach, the secondary coach. Kool-Aid McKinstry goes down, and they have a transfer corner in from the Sun Belt who was primarily just using a reserve role all season, and he goes up, and on his first, Georgia targeted him on the first play back after McKinstry went down, and he broke the pass up, and I think it might have been in the end zone, or it was real close. That coaching staff from top to bottom just did an incredible job of developing this team over the course of the year. And I thought the SEC championship game might have been the national championship. I'm kind of hesitant to say that now. It definitely could have been. Bama's got a really tough test in against Michigan. Michigan also has a really tough test in against Alabama in their first round of the playoffs game. And, they kind of just came off of a performance against Iowa in the Big Ten championship. It was exactly what I thought it was going to be. We weren't going to see, a huge blowout. Michigan just dominated from start to finish. Their defense shut down Iowa's horrendous offense. There's nothing much to say about that, to be honest. It's going to be Michigan football is what Michigan football is. They play a very ball control, efficient offense. You can kind of question the efficiency of Michigan's offense against Iowa. Iowa has a really, really good defense, however. You're gonna have to be able to generate a more explosive play against Alabama. So I think that's a really interesting matchup. But they are able to control the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball from the point of attack. They've got a really good run game. I think J.J. McCarthy is a very slept-on QB. He's a QB that can make every play you need him to make. He just hasn't needed to. And in the moments where he has, he's made them. Scrambling out the pocket to extend a play and then throwing on the run, or picking up a first down with his legs, or just delivering an absolute dot. You saw in the Michigan-Ohio State game, he threw a ball just right over a defender's shoulder pads into a pocket that led to a touchdown. Not many quarterbacks can make that play, make that throw. So I think he's a really underrated QB who can make the plays that need to be made. I think we're going to see him need to make more plays against Alabama in the playoff game. Final conference championship game here was the ACC. Florida State, I didn't think they were going to get it done with a third string in at QB. I wasn't sure if they were going to get it done with a second string in at QB. He didn't even play to begin the game. He was out with a concussion. But they did. And they beat a good Louisville team who was getting swept under the rug because they lost to a decent Kentucky team in the previous week in rivalry week. Florida State's defense didn't budge. They knew that they were going to have to win that game, and they went out and played like it. It was one of the most impressive defensive performances I've seen all year, and Florida State offensively was able to generate enough to complement that. That kind of leads perfectly into the playoff picks that happened on Selection Sunday. We had number 1 Michigan, number 2 Washington, number 3 Texas, number 4 Alabama, and Florida State got dropped down to 5, and there's a lot of controversy about it. The first thing I want to say is it sucks that Florida State is not in it, because I think that they were deserving of getting in it. However, after a couple of days of thinking about it, I do think the committee made the right decision, even though I think Florida State should have been in it. The explanation behind that is there was no right decision that could be made. You've got 12-1 Bama, who just beat Georgia, back-to-back national champions, whose only loss is to a team in the playoffs, versus Florida State, who is going to be without Jordan Travis, and even with Jordan Travis, would probably still be close to a double-digit underdog against Michigan or whoever they played. It's a sucky situation for Florida State, but either Alabama or Florida State was going to get screwed. Both teams are deserving of that 4th seed in the playoffs. I think the committee did get it right in terms of competitiveness. Now, where the committee went wrong is saying they were going to put the best teams in the playoffs. And so there's kind of 2 ways to look at that. In the past, you've seen them do most deserving. But this year they said they've always done the best teams, and that's what they're looking at this year, nothing else. Well, first of all, if that was the case, just for example, a couple years ago, Cincinnati would have never been in the playoffs. Cincinnati was never a top 4 team in the country. They may have been a top 10 team in the country, but they were never a top 4 team in the country. But they were one of the 4 most deserving teams of a playoff spot, and so they got in that year. This year, Florida State was more deserving than Bama, in my opinion. You survive an undefeated Power 5 regular season. You win in rivalry week in the Swamp with a backup QB. I get Florida's not making their bowl, and I get they're also playing hurt, but that's a tough environment to play in. And then you go beat a really competitive Louisville team in the conference championship with a 3rd-string QB. You went undefeated. You won a Power 5 championship. You absolutely were one of the 4 most deserving teams, even though Bama won the SEC championship against number 1 Georgia. I do think Florida State deserved it more. I do not think Florida State was a better team than Bama. However, I also don't think Washington's better than Georgia. I don't think Washington on paper at least, is better than Ohio State. So if you're putting the best 4 teams in, Georgia would be in the top 4 right now. So you didn't do the best 4 teams in the country, which to me, there needs to be some kind of rewording of the criteria here for the playoff committee, because that's where the controversy really lies, in my opinion, is the way they worded it. You can't say you put the best 4 teams in if you didn't put the best 4 teams in. I think Georgia would probably I know Georgia would be favored against Washington. Georgia would get favored over Texas, and I think Georgia would probably get favored over Michigan as well. So you didn't put the best 4 teams in. You didn't really put the best 4 or the most deserving 4 teams in. What you did do was kind of blend those 2 together, of best and most deserving, to create the most competitive playoff matchup we can get. So I do think that was the right decision. It sucks for Florida State, but that's something that they can build around in that locker room, get a us against the world mentality. Heading into next season, they'll realize they can't leave any doubt in the regular season. They had a lot of close games this year, and if they know that they've got to just go out and lay waste to whoever they're playing in order to convince a selection committee to let them in, that could be a good thing for the locker room. It could be a good thing for recruiting. They've already got a top 5 class. It could be a good thing for the transfer portal, which is loaded with a lot of talent right now. Mike Norvell is also a stud of a head coach. He's one of the best coaches in the country, in my opinion. You just played a Louisville team with your 3rd-string QB making his first start. He's attempted 7 passes all season. And you beat a good Louisville team, a top 15 team in the country. If you're going to beat this Florida State team from here on out, regardless of who's playing for him at QB, regardless of injuries, it's going to be crawling over broken glass. Mike Norvell is doing what a lot of people didn't think he could do, even last year or during last season. Florida State has the right guy. They're in really good hands. I firmly expect Florida State to be back in this playoff conversation next year. A couple of other guys who I think really proved it this year. Steve Sarkisian at Texas. A lot of doubt, in my opinion, that he faced heading into this season, especially after Oklahoma. The Oklahoma loss in the Red River Shootout, even though they beat Bama a couple weeks prior. But he proved them all wrong this year, and he got in the playoffs. He won a Big 12 championship. He got in the playoffs. Really big, impressive year for him. And then Kalen DeBoer never really had any doubt. A lot of people doubted his Washington team. I doubted his Washington team heading into this conference championship week. But he's the real deal. He's got a really good team. I think he's building a really, really good program. He's been a head coach for a total of 9 seasons, with a NAIA coach in there for a couple years. Over those 9 seasons, he's been 103-11. So just an insane winning percentage that he has. This dude knows how to coach football. He knows how to win. He knows how to build a program. And is looking like he's going to reload in the portal for next year. Will Rogers, they've crystal ball to go there. There's a really good receiver in the portal. Crystal ball to go there, Tobias Merriweather. And with that being said, the portal is just getting ramped up. Walter Nolan for D lineman from Texas A&M is in the portal. I believe Evan Stewart is in the portal. There's a lot of really big names. Clemson's lost a couple guys. I firmly expect Penn State to be really active. They're already looking at a top 10 player in the portal, Deion Burks, a receiver from Purdue. They need some wide receiver help. Clemson needs some wide receiver help. There's a lot of big names that could be plug and play for a lot of really, really good teams. Georgia's already got a guy. South Carolina is replacing Juice Wells with a guy from Vanderbilt who had a really good season 2 years ago. It's just going to start. It's only going to continue. We're going to see more people leave, especially from the 4 teams in the playoffs once the playoffs end or once those teams' respective seasons end. And there's a lot going on in the background, too, with coaching hires and getting ready for bowl games, and early signing day is coming up. So it's a really exciting time to be a college football fan. On coaching hires, Clemson filled their 2 vacant spots. Matt Luke is the new offensive line coach. I think that is about as good of a hire as Dabo could have made. He was the former head coach at Ole Miss. He's had a lot of assistant coaching stops. He was the O-line coach for Georgia during their first championship year with Kirby Smart. Really good talent developer. I think he's going to be a really good recruiter. It was a hire that needed to be made. It was a firing that needed to be made, and a really good hire by Dabo. Lamowski Hall, the defensive ends coach, also left. Chris Rump, the current D-line coach for the Minnesota Vikings, is filling that role. He's had some college coaching experience. He's coached at Clemson, and he won a couple championships as the D-line coach for Nick Saban at Bama. So he's got a lot of experience. He's going to be a really good coach. I think Dabo made some really good hires here. I think he saw some areas of the team that needed to be improved upon, and I think he's improving upon them. Another question mark for me still for that Clemson Tiger coaching staff is the receivers coach. But I think the way that the receivers came together at the end of the year, you saw some guys break out and emerge. You're seeing some really good recruiting going on right now. Maybe some activity in the portal. We'll see. I think Tyler Grissom really stepped up this season as a wide receivers coach, and I think it was a good decision to keep him around for at least another year. To round out this episode here, bowl games got released. There's a lot of big ones. We'll be doing predictions for all of the New Year's Six bowls and playoff bowl games. But a couple of ones that you may just kind of skip over. You may see the records for the teams, not think anything of them. Don't do that for these bowls I'm about to name out. Independence Bowl, you got Texas Tech versus Cal. I think that could be a really competitive bowl game. There's a sleeper matchup. Cal almost beat Auburn earlier in the year. Texas Tech, a little bit of a down year compared to what some preseason expectations were for them, including myself. I think that's going to be a really good game, though. The Las Vegas Bowl is featuring Utah versus maybe the most underlooked team in the country in Northwestern, who had all the stuff going on in the preseason with Pat Fitzgerald getting fired due to the hazing scandal. The interim head coach, who is now their full-time head coach, permanent head coach, just quietly led them to a 7-5 season. And I think they're going to be a really competitive matchup for Utah. Drake May, if he plays, that UNC versus West Virginia matchup in the Duke Mayo Bowl could be an absolutely fantastic matchup. Kind of got some different team styles that are in play there. Really good offensive line for West Virginia, a really good passing attack, and really a solid run game too for North Carolina, but some vulnerability on defense that could get exploited by Neil Brown and the Mountaineers. That could be a really good game. That's really contingent on Drake May playing, though. In the Texas Bowl, we have the Big 12 runner-ups and Oklahoma State versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M's gotten hammered by the portal. They may be able to keep some of those guys. I still think they have a lot of talent on that team. I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. Kansas State and NC State play in the first bowl game with an edible mascot, the Pop-Tart Bowl. The Pop-Tart mascot will be edible. So if you don't watch for that, at least watch for Kansas State and NC State. That's a really good matchup for both sides. You're going to see a really good ground attack from Kansas State against a really good run defense for NC State. So really competitive matchups there. And then in the Alamo Bowl, this might be one of the most exciting bowl games of the year. You've got arguably the hottest team in the country in Arizona, with maybe Coach of the Year and Jedd Fisch facing off against Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners. Their last game before entering SEC next year, and Arizona's last game before entering the Big 12. This is going to be a really exciting game. Last year's Alamo Bowl was Texas versus Washington. Both of those teams are in the playoffs now. Oklahoma and Arizona, they could very well be in playoff contention next year, especially with the 12-team playoff. So that's going to be a really good bowl game. True freshman quarterback going off against probably another true freshman quarterback with Dylan Gabriel now in the portal for Oklahoma. But there's it's a full slate of bowl games this year. There's a lot of really good matchups. The New Year's Six bowl games are going to be good. The playoff matchups are going to be even better, I think. So it's going to be a really exciting offseason for college football fans. Thank you all for watching.